In the high-stakes world of Manhattan's most exclusive dining, silence is the golden rule. But on a rainy Tuesday at the Gilded Lily, that silence was shattered by a billionaire who thought his money bought him the right to mock a confused elderly woman. He laughed at her inability to speak English. He called her a peasant. He didn't know that the waitress pouring his wine was her daughter, and he definitely didn't know that the dialect the waitress was about to unleash wouldn't just shut him up. It would threaten to dismantle his entire empire. This is the story of how a forgotten tongue humbled a king. The rain in New York City doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker. Inside the Gilded Lily, however, the weather was irrelevant. Here, the climate was controlled, the lighting was calculated to flatter the surgically enhanced, and the air smelled faintly of white truffles and old money. Amelia Clare adjusted the collar of her starch-stiff uniform. She was 26, with eyes the color of burnt umber and a posture that betrayed nothing. In this restaurant, you weren't a person. You were a ghost with a serving tray. You moved unseen, you heard everything, and you spoke only when spoken to. Table 4 needs a refill on the sparkling, and Amelia paused, turning to face Marcus Sterling, the floor manager. Marcus was a man who wore his authority like an ill-fitting suit, uncomfortable and constantly needing adjustment. "Yes, Mr. Sterling?" "Your guest," he sneered the word, glancing toward the kitchen service entrance, "is making the staff uncomfortable. She's sitting on a crate near the dishwasher. It's unsanitary." Amelia felt the heat rise up her neck, a stark contrast to the air-conditioned chill of the dining room. "My mother is waiting for my shift to end, Marcus. She just arrived from overseas. She has nowhere else to go until I get off the clock. She's not touching anything." "She looks like a beggar," Marcus muttered, checking his reflection in a polished spoon. "Just keep her out of sight. We have VIPs tonight. The merger is happening." Amelia didn't need to ask which merger. The whole city, at least the part of the city that mattered to the financial tabloids, was buzzing about it. The acquisition of the Holloway Tech Group by the Al-Fayed conglomerate. Amelia nodded tightly and slipped into the kitchen. The noise hit her instantly, the clatter of pans, the shouting of the sous chefs, the hiss of steam. In the far corner, perched on a plastic milk crate, sat a small woman wrapped in a faded, hand-woven shawl that looked grey against the stainless steel appliances. This was Sarah, or, as she was known, in the vast, silent stretches of the Negev desert where Amelia had spent her early childhood, Amira. Sarah looked up, her face a map of deep lines etched by the relentless sun. She smiled, revealing teeth that were perfect despite her age. She didn't speak English. Not a word. She spoke a dialect of Bedouin Arabic, so old, so steeped in the specific tribal history of the northern valleys that even modern Arabic speakers found it difficult to parse. "Ya binti," my daughter, Sarah whispered, her voice like dry leaves. "Is it time?" Amelia replied in English, shaking her head, forgetting for a moment that her mother couldn't understand the complex sentence. "No, Mama. 2 more hours. Just stay here. Please." She switched to the basic Arabic she used at home, a softened version. "Stay, eat." She pointed to a bowl of soup the dishwasher, a kind man named Hector, had given her. Sarah nodded, pulling the shawl tighter. She looked small, fragile, and utterly out of place. Amelia felt a pang of fierce protectiveness mixed with a sharp, toxic spike of shame. Amelia had spent 10 years building a life in America. She was Amelia Clare now. She had erased the accent, learned the wines, memorized the etiquette of the elite. She was saving for law school. She was Western. Her mother was the living, breathing reminder of the tent, the goats, and the dusty poverty Amelia had run from after her American father died. "Amelia! Front of house! Now!" Marcus's voice crackled over her earpiece. Amelia squeezed her mother's shoulder and ran. The restaurant was filling up. The noise level was a low, sophisticated hum. Amelia took her station in the VIP section, an elevated platform separated by velvet ropes. That was when he walked in. Karim Al-Fayed was not a man who entered rooms. He invaded them. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a navy suit that cost more than Amelia's entire year of tuition. He was flanked by 3 other men in suits, lawyers presumably, and 2 bodyguards who looked like they chewed gravel for breakfast. Karim was handsome in a predatory way. He had the kind of face that was used to being obeyed before he even opened his mouth. He was the CEO of Al-Fayed Global, a man who moved mountains, redirected rivers, and bought companies for sport. "The corner table," Karim said, his voice a deep baritone that carried across the room. He didn't look at the hostess. He looked through her. "And bring me the 82 Petrus. Open it now to breathe." Marcus was practically vibrating with nervous energy. He snapped his fingers at Amelia. "You take the table! Do not mess this up. He is the most important man in New York tonight." Amelia took a deep breath. She approached the table with the practiced grace of a dancer. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said, her voice smooth, neutral. "Welcome to the Gilded Lily." Karim didn't look up. He was scrolling through something on his phone. Water. Sparkling. No ice. "And where is the wine?" "It is being decanted, sir," Amelia said, placing the napkins. One of the lawyers, a nervous man with a red tie, spoke up. "Mr. Al-Fayed, regarding the land deed in the northern sector, the lawyers are saying the lineage is contested. The grandmother died without a clear will." Karim slammed his phone onto the white tablecloth. The sound silenced the nearby tables. "I do not care about some dead Bedouin woman's lineage," Karim hissed. His English was perfect, accented only slightly by his Oxford education. "I bought the government. I bought the permits. If there is a stray heir running around the desert with a piece of paper, find them and pay them off, or bury them. I don't care which." Amelia froze for a microsecond as she poured the water. The mention of the northern sector and Bedouin lineage triggered a strange, dormant memory in the back of her mind. But she pushed it down. It was a common story. Developers crushing locals. "Watch the pour!" Karim snapped. Amelia pulled the bottle back. Not a drop had spilled, but he was agitated. "Apologies, sir. You are hovering." Karim waved a hand dismissively. "Go." Amelia retreated to the shadows of the service station. She watched them. They were like sharks circling a carcass. They laughed loudly, drank the $3,000 wine like it was soda, and treated the staff like furniture. An hour passed. The tension in the restaurant was palpable. Then, disaster struck. The kitchen door swung open. Usually the staff moved in a synchronized flow, but the new busboy, panicked by the rush, tripped. He stumbled backward, knocking into a stack of trays. The crash was loud, but what followed was worse. In the confusion, the door remained propped open. And there, wandering out from the safety of the dish pit, disoriented by the noise and looking for her daughter, was Sarah. She shuffled into the main dining room. The bright chandelier lights seemed to blind her. She clutched her shawl, her eyes wide with panic. She looked at the sea of strangers, the glittering jewelry, the cold faces. "Amelia," she called out. Her voice was thin, wobbly. "Amelia, Binti?" The room went silent. A woman in a Dior dress gasped. Marcus, the manager, looked as if he was about to have a stroke. Amelia was halfway across the room with a pitcher of water. She froze. "No. Please, God, no." Sarah saw Amelia. Her face lit up with relief. She took a step forward, but in her disorientation, she bumped into the back of a chair. The chair belonging to Karim Al-Fayed. The impact was light, barely a nudge, but Karim reacted as if he had been stabbed. He spun around, his wine glass sloshing dangerous red liquid near the rim. He looked down. He saw the faded grey shawl. He saw the cheap plastic sandals. He saw the face of a woman who had spent a lifetime in the wind and sand. Sarah recoiled, sensing the man's aggression. She held up her hands in a universal gesture of apology. "Samahni, ya walad." "Forgive me, son," she murmured in her heavy dialect. Karim stared at her. He didn't see an old woman. He saw an interruption. He saw dirt in his pristine palace. "What is this?" Karim stood up, looming over her. He was over 6 feet tall. Sarah was barely 5 feet. How did this creature get in here? Marcus was sprinting across the floor. "Mr. Al-Fayed, I am so sorry. This is a security breach. We are removing her immediately." Amelia dropped the water pitcher on a service tray, a loud clang, and started moving, but she was too far away. Karim looked at Sarah with pure disgust. He laughed, a cruel, barking sound. He turned to his lawyers. "Look at this. I pay $5,000 for a table, and they let the stray animals in from the rain." Sarah didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. She shrank back, tears welling in her eyes. She looked frantically for Amelia. "Mafaham! Mafaham!" "I don't understand." Karim leaned down, his face inches from hers. "You are lost, old woman. The dumpster is out back." He switched to Arabic, but it was modern standard Arabic, formal and cold. "Get out, beggar! You smell like a goat." Sarah flinched. She understood that. She began to tremble violently. She tried to speak, to explain she was waiting for her daughter, but her dialect was thick, ancient, and tripped over her fear. She mumbled something that sounded like, "The land. The waiting." Karim laughed again, louder this time. He looked around the restaurant, inviting the other patrons to join in his amusement. "She speaks gibberish. Listen to her. It's like a donkey trying to recite poetry. My mother no speaks English." He mocked her in a high-pitched caricature voice. "My mother no speaks English. She only speaks dirt." The lawyers chuckled nervously. A few diners snickered. "Marcus!" Karim shouted. "Get this filth out of my sight before I buy this building and fire every single one of you." Marcus grabbed Sarah's arm. He wasn't gentle. His fingers dug into her frail bicep. "Come on, let's go! Now!" Sarah cried out in pain. "Amelia!" That was the breaking point. The invisible chain that held Amelia Clare to her job, to her Western identity, to her silence. It snapped. It didn't just break. It vaporized. "Take your hands off her." The voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a whip. Marcus froze. He looked up. Amelia was standing there. She wasn't the submissive waitress anymore. Her shoulders were back, her chin high, her eyes blazing with a cold, hard fire. "Amelia, get back to work," Marcus hissed. "I'll deal with you later." "I said." Amelia stepped closer, ripping Marcus's hand off her mother's arm with surprising strength. "Take your filthy hands off my mother." The restaurant went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the wine fridge. Karim Al-Fayed turned slowly to face Amelia. He looked her up and down, a smirk playing on his lips. "Oh? The help speaks? And this antique is your mother?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "I suppose the apple doesn't fall far from the compost heap. Tell her to leave, waitress, before I have you both arrested for vagrancy." Amelia guided her mother behind her, shielding Sarah with her own body. She looked at Karim. She looked at the expensive suit, the arrogance, the utter lack of humanity. She took a breath. When she spoke, she didn't speak English, and she didn't speak the modern standard Arabic Karim had used to insult her mother. She spoke in the Hail dialect, a rare, potent Bedouin tongue from the deep north, the language of the tribal judges, the language of the old guard. It was a dialect that commanded respect among the true families of the desert, a dialect that predated the oil money and the skyscrapers. "You call yourself a son of the sands, Karim Al-Fayed?" Her voice rang out, guttural and poetic, the sounds rolling off her tongue with terrifying authority. "You, who have forgotten the taste of dust? You stand here in a suit sewn by Italians, drinking wine made by Frenchmen, and you mock the tongue that wrote your grandfather's name?" Karim's smirk vanished. His eyes widened. The glass of wine in his hand trembled slightly. The lawyers looked at each other, confused. They didn't understand the dialect. But Karim did. Amelia wasn't done. She stepped forward, entering his personal space. "You laugh at her," she continued, the dialect becoming even more specific, utilizing terms reserved for blood feuds and honor. "But the woman you call a beggar wears the weave of the Bani Saka. She carries the history you sold for concrete. You think you are a king because you sit on a chair of velvet? A true king knows that a guest is sacred, even if she comes from the storm." Karim stepped back. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Who are you?" he whispered in English, his composure cracking. "I am the waitress you were about to fire," Amelia said, switching seamlessly back to crisp, perfect English. "And that woman is Sarah Al-Rahman. And I believe—" Amelia paused, looking at the lawyer with the red tie, who was now gaping at her. "I believe you were looking for an heir to the Northern Sector deed? The one with the contested lineage?" Amelia smiled, but there was no warmth in it. It was a smile that promised war. "You just threw her out of your dining room." The silence in the Gilded Lily stretched, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't the polite silence of fine dining. It was the terrified silence of a courtroom before a verdict is read. The ambient jazz music seemed to grate against the tension, a cheerful trumpet solo mocking the gravity of the standoff. Mr. Finch, the nervous lawyer with the red tie, was the first to move. He scrambled for his briefcase, his fingers fumbling with the brass latches. The click-click of the locks sounded like gunshots in the quiet room. He pulled out a thick sheaf of documents, his eyes darting from the trembling old woman in the shawl to the waitress who stood like a sentinel before her. "Al-Rahman," Finch whispered, his voice cracking. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, scanning a genealogy chart that had been buried deep in the appendix of the merger agreement. "Mr. Al-Fayed, the name matches. The matriarch of the Wadi Rum sector, the deed holder for the aquifer access." Karim Al-Fayed did not look at the lawyer. His eyes were locked on Amelia. For the first time all evening, he wasn't looking at a servant. He was looking at an adversary. The smirk had been wiped from his face, replaced by a cold, calculating intensity. He was a man who played chess with corporations, and he suddenly realized he had been checkmated by a pawn. "A name is just a noise," Karim said slowly, his voice low but carrying a dangerous undercurrent. "There are 1,000 Sarah Al-Rahmans in the refugee camps. Do not be an idiot, Finch. This is a hustle, a shakedown." He took a step toward Amelia, entering her personal space again. He smelled of expensive cologne and old whiskey, the scent of power. "You think because you speak a dead dialect you can frighten me? You are a waitress, Amelia. You serve bread. You wipe tables. Do not pretend to be royalty because you learned a few fancy words from your grandmother." Amelia didn't flinch. She watched him with eyes that had turned to flint. Slowly, deliberately, She reached up and unpinned the small gold name tag from her uniform. Amelia. She looked at it for a moment, then dropped it onto the pristine white tablecloth next to the $3,000 bottle of wine. "My name," she said, her voice dropping to a register that vibrated with quiet fury, "is Amira bint Sarah. And I don't just speak the dialect, Karim. I know the law." She turned to the lawyer, Finch. "The deed you are holding, the one for the northern sector, specifically references the Well of the White Stones, does it not?" Finch went pale. He looked at the document, then back at her. "Yes. Yes, it does. Clause 4, Section B. And," Amelia continued, "it states that the land cannot be sold, transferred, or developed without the thumbprint seal of the direct female descendant of the Bani Sakha line. A clause inserted by the British in 1948 to prevent exactly what you are trying to do." The room gasped. This wasn't just restaurant gossip anymore. This was corporate espionage, unfolding over dinner. Karim's jaw tightened. A vein pulsed visibly in his temple. He knew that clause. It had been the single thorn in his side for 6 months. His construction crews were sitting idle, burning millions of dollars a day because they couldn't legally break ground without that signature. His team had spent months searching for the heir, scouring villages and databases, assuming she was dead or lost in the system. And here she was, sitting on a milk crate near his dishwasher. Marcus, the manager, sensing his restaurant was turning into a battlefield, tried to regain control. He stepped forward, wringing his hands. "Amelia, please, this is highly inappropriate. We can discuss this in the office. Mr. Al-Fayed, I can comp the meal, I can—" "Shut up, Marcus," Karim and Amelia said in unison, neither breaking eye contact with the other. Karim let out a short, sharp breath through his nose. He forced a smile, a terrible, shark-like thing. "Okay," he said, spreading his hands. "Okay, you have my attention. You are the daughter. She is the heir. Fine." He reached into his inner suit jacket pocket. The bodyguards tensed, but he only pulled out a checkbook. It was leather-bound, sleek, and black. "Everything has a price," Karim said, clicking a gold pen. "This is New York City. We don't do blood feuds here. We do transactions. You want to save your mother from poverty? You want to get her out of that." He gestured vaguely at Sarah's clothes with the pen. "Rags? Fine. I will write you a check right now for $500,000. You take the check, she signs the paper, and you walk out of here and never come back." He scribbled the numbers, tore the check out with a flourish, and held it out to Amelia. $500,000, Karim said softly. "Think of what you can do. No more waiting tables. No more Marcus yelling at you. You can buy a house. You can buy her dignity." Amelia looked at the check. The paper fluttered slightly in the air conditioning. It was more money than she would make in 10 years at the Gilded Lily. Sarah, still seated on the floor where she had fallen, looked up. She didn't understand the English words, but she knew what a check was. She knew what a bribe looked like. Her hand reached out and gripped Amelia's ankle. Her grip was weak, trembling. "La Binti," Sarah whispered. "La. No, my daughter. No." Amelia looked down at her mother. She saw the fear, but beneath the fear, she saw the pride of a woman who had survived droughts, wars, and displacement without ever selling her soul. Amelia looked back at Karim. She took the check from his fingers. Karim's smile widened. "Smart girl." Amelia held the check up to the candlelight of the table. "You think dignity is something you can buy at a store, Mr. Al-Fayed? You think because you forgot who you are, everyone else has too?" With slow, deliberate movements, Amelia tore the check in half, then in quarters, then into tiny confetti pieces. She opened her hand and let the pieces drift down onto the table, covering Kareem's plate of half-eaten truffle risotto. "My mother is not for sale," Amelia said, "and neither is the northern sector." The tearing of the check seemed to echo louder than the breaking glass had earlier. Kareem stared at the confetti on his plate. His face turned a color that wasn't quite red, but a deep, mottled purple. He was a man accustomed to refusal, but only as a negotiation tactic. This wasn't negotiation. This was insult. "You stupid little girl," Kareem hissed, his voice losing its polished veneer. "Do you have any idea who I am? I can bury you. I can make sure you never work in this city again. I can have immigration on your doorstep by morning. Do you think her papers are in order? Do you?" It was a low blow, a standard threat for the powerful against the vulnerable. But Amelia didn't flinch. "Her papers are perfect," Amelia said calmly. "She is a naturalized citizen. I made sure of it 3 years ago. You can call whoever you want." Kareem slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. "Marcus, get them out! Now! Call the police! Trespassing! Assault! Make something up!" Marcus, sweating profusely, looked between the billionaire and his waitress. He was a coward, but he was a coward who feared money more than morality. He reached for his phone. "Yes, Mr. Al-Fayed. Immediately." "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Marcus," a new voice chimed in. The voice came from the table directly behind Kareem. A grey-haired man in a tweed jacket had stood up. He had been quietly eating his steak, watching the entire exchange over the top of his reading glasses. He wiped his mouth with a napkin and walked over to the commotion. "Mr. Al-Fayed," the man said, "I believe we met at the Davos summit last year. Charles Widmore, New York Times." Kareem froze. The color drained from his face instantly. The New York Times. Charles Widmore looked at Amelia, then at Sarah, and finally fixed his gaze on Kareem. "I came here for the sea bass, but it seems I've stumbled onto a much more interesting story. Billionaire developer abuses indigenous elder over ancestral land rights. It has a certain ring to it for the Sunday front page, don't you think?" Kareem swallowed hard. "Mr. Widmore, this is a misunderstanding, a personnel dispute. The woman was drunk, disruptive." "I've been watching for 20 minutes, Widmore said dryly. "She looked lost. You looked cruel. And this young woman," he nodded to Amelia, "seems to have a better grasp of contract law than your entire legal team." Widmore pulled out his phone. "I didn't record it, of course. That would be rude, but I have an excellent memory, and I have 3 million Twitter followers who love a good underdog story." The dynamic in the room shifted so violently it was almost palpable. The power had moved from the man in the suit to the man with the pen, and the woman with the truth. Kareem looked around. He saw the other diners. People weren't just watching anymore. They were holding up their phones. The red recording lights were blinking like tiny, accusing eyes in the darkness. He had been so focused on crushing the waitress that he hadn't noticed the audience. In the age of information, a viral video was more dangerous than a lawsuit. A video of Kareem Al-Fayed mocking an old woman for not speaking English. That would tank the Al-Fayed stock price by morning. The merger would collapse. The board would call for his head. He was trapped. Kareem took a deep breath, smoothing his jacket. He needed to pivot. He needed to salvage this. "Mr. Widmore," Kareem said, his voice strained but quieter. "Let's not be hasty. Emotions are high. It has been a long day." He turned back to Amelia. The malice was gone from his eyes, replaced by a desperate, panicked bargaining. "Ms. Claire, Amira," he corrected himself, struggling with the name. "Please, let us be civilized. Your mother is Tired. She needs to sit. Please take my chair. He gestured to his own velvet seat. Amelia stared at him. The audacity of the man was breathtaking. A minute ago he wanted to throw them in the dumpster. Now he was offering his throne. She doesn't want your chair, Amelia said. She knelt down next to her mother. Sarah was still trembling, but she had stopped crying. She looked at Amelia with confusion. Binti, who are these men? Why are they shouting? Amelia took her mother's rough hands in hers. They are not shouting anymore, Mama. They are listening. For the first time, they are listening. Amelia stood up. She addressed the room, her voice clear and carrying to the back walls. My mother does not speak English, Amelia announced. She never went to school. She cannot read a menu in this restaurant. But she raised 6 children alone in the desert after my father died. She walked 10 miles a day to fetch water, so we wouldn't die of thirst. The water from the very aquifer this man wants to drain for a golf course. She turned to Karim. You mocked her because she looked weak to you. But you are the weak one, Karim. You need her signature. You need her permission. Without her, your merger is dead. Your billions are just paper. Finch, the lawyer, leaned in and whispered frantically into Karim's ear. She's right, sir. If this goes public, if the lineage is confirmed and she refuses to sign, the Holloway Group will pull out. The deal expires on Friday. We need her. Karim looked at Amelia. He looked at the cell phones recording him. He looked at Charles Widmore, who was tapping his chin thoughtfully. What do you want? Karim asked. The arrogance was gone. He sounded defeated. Double the offer. $1 million? $2 million? I told you, Amelia said. It's not about money. Then what? Karim threw his hands up. What do you want? Amelia looked around the restaurant. She looked at Marcus, who was cowering near the wine rack. She looked at the bus boys and the runners who had been watching in awe. She looked at the expensive crystal and the polished mahogany. I want you to apologize, Amelia said. Karim scoffed. I apologize. There, I'm sorry. Not to me. Amelia shook her head. To her, in her language. Karim froze. I don't speak the dialect. You know that. I speak modern standard. Then learn, Amelia said coldly. You have a phone. You have a brain. Figure it out. And, she added, I want everyone to hear it. And then, I want you to leave. This is her table now. Karim stared at her. It was humiliation. Pure, unadulterated humiliation. But as he looked at Widmore, and at the grim faces of his own lawyers, he realized he had no choice. The survival of his empire hung on the whim of the woman he had called a peasant. He pulled out his phone. He typed frantically into a translation app, his thumbs slipping on the screen. He muttered under his breath, sweating. After a long, agonizing minute, he put the phone away. He walked over to Sarah. He had to kneel to be at her eye level. His knees hit the hard floor. The floor he had said was too dirty for her. Sarah looked at him, her eyes wide. Karim took a breath. He struggled with the guttural sounds, the unfamiliar cadence of the Hail dialect. Ana Asif, he stammered. Ana, Aktat, Fihakik. I am sorry. I sinned, against your right. It was broken, clumsy, and accented. But the words were there. Sarah tilted her head. She didn't smile. She simply looked at him with the ancient, piercing gaze of a matriarch. The tongue is a small lion, she said in her dialect, her voice raspy but steady. If you let it loose, it will eat you. She waved her hand dismissively. Go. Karim stood up. He looked destroyed. He signaled to his lawyers. We are leaving. The check, Amelia called out as he turned away. For the meal. You still have to pay for the wine you opened. Karim didn't look back. He gestured to Finch. Pay it. pay for everyone. As the billionaire and his entourage shuffled out of the restaurant into the rainy New York night, the dining room remained silent for 1 second longer. Then, someone started clapping. It was the dishwasher, Hector, standing in the kitchen doorway. Then Charles Widmore joined in. Then the woman in the Dior dress. Soon the entire restaurant was erupting in applause. But Amelia didn't bow. She didn't smile. She simply knelt down, picked up her mother's hand, and kissed it. "Come, Mama," she said softly. "Let's get you something to eat." At a table. However, the story wasn't over. As Amelia helped her mother into the velvet chair Karim had vacated, she saw Finch, the lawyer, lingering by the door. He wasn't leaving with his boss. He was looking at Amelia with a strange expression, not fear, but calculation. He walked back toward them, ignoring Karim's shout from the street. "Miss Clare," Finch said, lowering his voice. "That was impressive, but you made a mistake." Amelia stiffened. "And what is that?" "You humiliated a man who has never lost in his life," Finch said, adjusting his glasses. "He apologized to save the merger. But the merger isn't until Friday. That gives him 3 days. Finch looked at the door to ensure Karim was gone. "He won't come back with a checkbook next time," Finch warned, his voice dropping to a whisper. "He'll come with something much worse. You need to get her out of the city, tonight." Amelia felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The victory tasted like ash. She realized then that she hadn't won the war. She had just fired the opening shot. "Why are you telling me this?" Amelia asked. Finch looked at Sarah, then back at Amelia. He sighed. "My grandmother was Navajo. I know what it looks like when men like him try to erase people like you." He placed a business card on the table. "If you survive the night, call me. You're going to need a lawyer who isn't on his payroll." With that, Finch turned and ran into the rain, leaving Amelia standing in the center of the applause, clutching the card, realizing that the real danger had just begun. The adrenaline that had sustained Amelia inside the Gilded Lily began to curdle into a cold, shivering nausea the moment the heavy oak doors swung shut behind them. The transition was jarring. Inside, it had been a world of warmth, soft jazz, and moral victory. Outside, the New York night was unforgiving. The rain had intensified, transforming from a drizzle into a slanted, stinging downpour that blurred the neon lights of the avenue into streaks of aggressive red and blue. Amelia held her mother's arm tightly. Sarah was wrapped in her damp shawl, clutching a plastic bag containing a warm meal Hector the dishwasher had packed for them at the last second. "Wait here, Mama," Amelia said, her voice sounding thin against the roar of traffic. "I'll hail a cab." She stepped to the curb, raising her hand. Yellow taxis sped by, their off-duty lights glowing, or their back seats already filled with people who looked drier, richer, and safer than she felt. "Amelia," Sarah tugged at her sleeve. Her voice was low, pitched to the vibration of the earth rather than the air. "The eyes are still on us." Amelia looked back at the restaurant. Through the rain-streaked window, she could see the blurred silhouettes of diners still eating. "It's okay, Mama. We won. They're just staring." "No." Sarah shook her head slowly. She pointed not at the restaurant, but down the block. "Not the sheep, the wolf." Amelia followed her mother's gaze. Parked 50 yards away, idling in a no-standing zone, was a black Cadillac Escalade. Its windows were tinted so dark they looked like voids cut into the night. It wasn't one of the usual town cars waiting for VIPs. The engine was running, the exhaust puffing white clouds into the cold air, but the lights were off. A chill that had nothing to do with the rain seized Amelia. Finch's warning echoed in her mind. He won't come back with a checkbook next time. Amelia dropped her hand. She stepped back from the curb. "We're not taking a taxi," she whispered. "Why?" Sarah asked in her dialect, sensing the shift in her daughter's energy. "Because a taxi leaves a digital trail," Amelia murmured, her mind racing. "And if I order an Uber, they have my location. And if we go to my apartment—" She stopped. Her blood went cold. Her employee file. Marcus, the manager, had her file in the office. It contained her social security number, her bank details, and her home address, the address where she and her mother slept. If Karim Al-Fayed wanted to, he could have a team at her front door before she even put her key in the lock. He was a man who built skyscrapers. Breaking into a fourth-floor walk-up in Astoria would be child's play for his security team. "We can't go home," Amelia said, the realization landing on her like a physical weight. Sarah didn't panic. In the desert, when the sandstorm comes, you don't scream. You find shelter. "Where then?" Amelia looked around. The Escalade shifted into gear. It crept forward, inching through the traffic, closing the distance. Amelia grabbed her phone. She scrolled past her landlord, past her few friends from college who wouldn't understand, past the police, who Finch had implied were likely on Karim's payroll. She stopped at a name. Hector. He had clocked out 5 minutes before them. He usually took the subway. Amelia grabbed her mother's hand. "Run!" They didn't run like joggers. They ran like fugitives. Amelia pulled Sarah down a narrow alleyway between the restaurant and a high-end boutique. The alley smelled of wet cardboard and garbage. They splashed through puddles, the dirty water soaking Amelia's uniform shoes and Sarah's sandals. They burst out onto the parallel street, 5th Avenue. It was brighter here, more crowded. Amelia scanned the crowd. She saw him, a bulky figure in a hooded sweatshirt, heading toward the subway entrance on the corner. "Hector!" Amelia screamed. The wind tore the name away, but the figure paused. He turned. Under the hood, Hector's kind, tired face looked surprised. Amelia sprinted the last 20 yards, dragging Sarah, who was breathing hard but moving with surprising agility. "Amelia?" Hector asked, his eyes widening as he saw their state. "What is it? Did Marcus fire you anyway?" "They're following us," Amelia gasped, looking over her shoulder. The black Escalade had just turned the corner. It was prowling the street, slow and predatory. "We can't go home. They have my address." Hector looked at the car. He didn't ask questions. He didn't ask for proof. He had grown up in a neighborhood where black SUVs with tinted windows meant only one thing: trouble. "Subway," Hector said instantly. "Come." He ushered them down the stairs of the 53rd Street station. The air below was stale and warm. As they swiped through the turnstiles, Hector using his card for Sarah, Amelia risked a glance back up the stairs. 2 men in suits were standing at the top of the entrance, silhouettes against the rainy sky. One of them tapped an earpiece. They didn't follow. They didn't need to. They had seen them go underground. "Where does this train go?" Sarah asked, eyeing the screeching metal beast as it pulled into the station. "Queens," Hector said to Amelia. "My aunt lives in Jackson Heights. She has a basement. It's not the Ritz, but it's perfect," Amelia said, her voice trembling. "Thank you, Hector. I don't know how to repay you." Hector shrugged, guiding them onto the crowded train. "You stood up to the king," he said, a small smile playing on his lips. "For 5 minutes tonight, you made the dish pit feel like the owners. That is payment enough." As the doors hissed shut and the train lurched forward, burying them in the dark tunnels of the city, Amelia slumped against the plastic seat. She looked at her mother. Sarah was sitting upright, her eyes closed, her lips moving in a silent rhythm. "What are you doing, Mama?" Amelia whispered. Sarah opened one eye. "I am memorizing the path," she said. "A Bedouin never enters a cave without knowing the way out." Amelia looked at the subway map, a tangled web of colored lines. To her, it was a transit system. To her mother, it was just another canyon system to be navigated. But as the train rattled on, Amelia's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text message. "Unknown number. The northern sector is a barren patch of dirt. Is it worth your life, Amelia? You have until Friday." Amelia stared at the screen. They already had her cell number. The siege had begun. The basement in Jackson Heights smelled of cumin, damp concrete, and laundry detergent. It was a stark contrast to the white tablecloth world of the Gilded Lily, but to Amelia, it felt like a fortress. Hector's aunt, a formidable woman named Rosa, who asked no questions but poured very strong coffee, had given them blankets and a space heater. Now, at 3 a.m., the house was silent. Amelia sat on the pull-out sofa, surrounded by papers. She had dumped the contents of her bag, everything she had on the case. It wasn't much, just copies of her mother's immigration papers, a few old letters from Jordan, and the business card Finch had given her. Sarah was sitting on the floor, refusing the sofa. She had spread her shawl out like a prayer rug. In the center of the shawl, she had placed a small leather pouch she wore around her neck. "Mama," Amelia said, rubbing her temples, "we need to talk about the land. The lawyers, the men in the suits, they say it's just sand. They say there's water underneath, but that's it." Sarah didn't look up. She was carefully undoing the knot of the pouch. "They see with their pockets," she said. "We see with our blood." "I need to know exactly what is there," Amelia pressed. "If we are going to fight them, I need to know why. Why did grandmother refuse to sell to the British? Why did you refuse the Jordanian government in the 90s? We were starving, Mama. We could have used the money." It was a question Amelia had never dared ask growing up. The land was a ghost story, something discussed in hushed tones, a burden rather than an asset. Sarah finally opened the pouch. She tipped it over. A single object fell onto the shawl. It wasn't a diamond. It wasn't gold. It was a stone, a smooth, white stone, perfectly round, about the size of a pigeon's egg. It seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of the basement. "The Well of the White Stones," Sarah whispered. Amelia picked it up. It was cold. "It's just a rock, Mama." "It is a seal," Sarah corrected her. "Before the borders were drawn, before the English came with their maps, our tribe was the keeper of the memory. This valley isn't just an aquifer. It is a necropolis." Amelia froze. "A graveyard?" "Not for everyone," Sarah said, her voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. "For the judges. For 300 years, every peacekeeper, every mediator, every woman who stopped a war between the tribes was buried in the caves above that water. Their bodies are dust, Amelia. But their spirits are in the water. That is why the water is sweet. That is why it heals." Sarah looked at her daughter with fierce, tear-filled eyes. "If Al-Fayed drills there, he does not just take water. He drinks our ancestors. He turns the bones of the peacekeepers into flush water for a hotel toilet." Sarah spat the words out with revulsion. "That is why I cannot sign. To sell the land is to sell the souls of the women who came before me." Amelia sat back, the weight of the revelation settling on her. It wasn't a property dispute. It was a desecration. Al-Fayed wasn't just a developer. In her mother's eyes, he was a grave robber. "Okay," Amelia said, her voice steadying. "Okay, I understand. We don't sign." Never. She reached for her phone. I need to check our accounts. We need cash. If we're going to stay hidden, we need... She unlocked her banking app. Access denied. Account frozen. Suspicious activity. Contact branch administrator. Amelia's stomach dropped. She checked her credit card app. Same message. She checked her savings, the law school fund she had scraped together for 6 years. Frozen. He's fast, Amelia whispered. He's cut us off. The phone rang in her hand. It made her jump. It wasn't the unknown number this time. It was the number on the business card. Arthur Finch. Amelia stared at it. Was he a trap? He worked for Kareem, but he had warned her. She answered, putting it on speaker. This better not be a threat, Mr. Finch. It's not a threat, Miss Clare. Finch's voice sounded tinny and exhausted. It's a forecast. I'm currently in the office shredding documents I shouldn't be shredding, so listen carefully. My accounts are frozen, Amelia said. That's just the opening jab, Finch said. Kareem is on a warpath. I just left a strategy meeting. He's not going to try to buy you again. And he's not going to kill you. Too messy. Too much press attention after tonight. Then what? He's going for the incompetency plea, Finch said. Amelia frowned. What does that mean? He has a team of doctors, unethical ones, reviewing the footage from the restaurant. They are drafting a petition to the New York courts to have your mother declared mentally incompetent, senile dementia, unable to make legal decisions. Amelia stood up, pacing the small basement. That's a lie. She's sharper than he is. It doesn't matter, Finch interrupted. He controls the narrative. He will argue that an elderly, homeless woman wandering into a high-end restaurant is clear evidence of cognitive decline. He will say you, the estranged daughter, are manipulating a confused old woman to extort money from a philanthropist. The room spun. It was evil. It was brilliant. It twisted the truth so effectively that it made Amelia look like the villain. If the judge grants an emergency guardianship, Finch continued, the court appoints a trustee to manage her assets. Guess who the court-appointed trustee will be, or who the trustee will sell to immediately? Him, Amelia whispered. Exactly. By Friday noon, he will have a court order, signing that land over to himself in her best interest, to pay for her care in a facility he probably owns. Amelia felt like she couldn't breathe. How do we stop it? You have to prove she is competent, Finch said, and you have to do it before the emergency hearing on Friday morning. You need a countersuit. You need an independent psychiatric evaluation, and you need a specialized lawyer. I can't represent you. I'm conflicted out. But I can send you a file. Evidence that Kareem knew about the heritage site and buried the environmental impact report. Why are you helping us? Amelia asked. You're risking your career. There was a pause on the line. Tonight, Finch said softly, when Kareem told her to leave. He used a word. Creature. My grandmother. She didn't speak English well either. I spent my whole life trying to be one of the guys in the suits. Tonight, I realized I was just the guy holding the coat of the bully. The line crackled. I'm sending the file to your email now. Download it, print it, then delete the email. And Amelia? Yes. Don't stay in Queens. He has trackers on the subway turnstiles. If you used a card, he knows where you are. The line went dead. Amelia looked at Hector's aunt, Rosa, who was asleep in a chair upstairs. She looked at the basement door. Mama, Amelia said, grabbing the white stone and shoving it into her pocket. Pack the bag. Are we running again? Sarah asked, standing up. No, Amelia said. Her eyes were hard, the fear calcifying into a cold, diamond-hard rage. We are done running. If he wants to prove you are incompetent, we are going to prove he is a criminal. We are going to the one place he won't look for us. Where? Amelia picked up the file Finch had just emailed her. It was heavy with secrets. We're going to the United Nations. Friday morning did not bring a courtroom hearing. It brought a global stage. Karim Al-Fayed stood at the podium of the International Summit on Sustainable Development, held in the General Assembly Hall of the United Nations. He was there to announce the Green Oasis project, the rebranding of his acquisition of the northern sector. He looked invincible, his suit crisp, his smile practiced. He spoke of bringing water to the desert and modernizing the forgotten corners of the world. The audience of diplomats and investors applauded polite, unaware that outside the building, Charles Widmore had just used his press credentials to sneak 2 guests past security. As Karim reached the climax of his speech, "We must clear the old debris to build the new future." The heavy doors at the back of the hall swung open. It wasn't security. It was Amelia, wearing her waitress uniform, pushing a wheelchair. In it sat Sarah, wearing not rags, but a traditional ceremonial robe of the Bani Saka, deep red and embroidered with gold thread, a garment pulled from the depths of her travel bag, the armor of a queen. The room murmured. Security stepped forward, but Widmore, standing with the press pool, live-streamed the intrusion to millions. "Let them speak!" he shouted. Karim froze. "Security! Remove these trespassers!" Amelia stepped up to a microphone in the aisle. Her voice didn't shake. "You claimed my mother was mentally incompetent, Mr. Al-Fayed. You filed a motion saying she couldn't remember her own name to steal her land." She turned to Sarah. "Mama, tell them." Sarah stood up. She didn't need the wheelchair. It was theatre. She walked to the center of the aisle. In the vast, echoey hall of the United Nations, she began to speak. She didn't speak English. She chanted. She recited the Qasida of the Wells, an oral history of the northern sector that spanned 400 years. She named every birth, every death, every drought, and every treaty made at the Well of the White Stones. She recited 14 generations of lineage without a single pause or stutter. It was a feat of memory no incompetent mind could achieve. It was a performance of intellectual brilliance that shamed the man who called her a creature. The translators scrambled to keep up. The room fell into a stunned silence. When she finished, Sarah pointed a weathered finger at Karim. "I know the names of the dead," she said, her voice amplified by the microphone. "Do you know what is under the rock you want to drill?" Amelia slammed Finch's file onto the nearest delegate's desk. "He knows!" Amelia shouted. "This is his own internal report. The aquifer is connected to a sulfur vent. If he drills, he doesn't just destroy the graves, he poisons the water supply for 3 countries. He hid the report to save the stock price." The room erupted. Delegates grabbed the file. Phones flashed. Karim's face went grey. He looked at his lawyers, but they were already backing away, checking their phones as the Al-Fayed stock began a freefall on the screen behind him. Karim Al-Fayed had come to bury a peasant. Instead, he had dug his own grave. In the weeks that followed, the Green Oasis project was cancelled. The United Nations declared the northern sector a protected heritage site, with Sarah Al-Rahman named as its legal custodian. Karim Al-Fayed was removed as CEO by his own board of directors amidst an investigation into fraud and environmental negligence. The last anyone saw of him, he was screaming at his driver in the rain outside his seized penthouse. Amelia didn't go back to the Gilded Lily. She finished law school on a full scholarship provided by a foundation set up by Charles Widmore. She became an attorney specializing in indigenous land rights. But the most enduring image of that week wasn't the stock crash or the lawsuits. It was a photo taken by a tourist in Queens. It showed an old woman in a red embroidered robe sitting on a park bench, feeding pigeons, while a tall young woman in a suit sat next to her, listening intently. They weren't speaking English. They were speaking the language of the desert, the language of survival, the language that had toppled a king. And that is the story of how a billionaire learned the hard way that dignity doesn't have a price tag, and wisdom doesn't always speak English. It's a reminder that the people we ignore, the ones serving our food, cleaning our streets, or sitting in the corner, often carry stories and strengths we can't even imagine. If this story moved you, please hit that like button. It helps us share these powerful stories with more people. And if you want to see more real-life dramas about karma and justice, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Question for you. Have you ever seen someone underestimated because of how they looked or spoke? Tell me your story in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.